Dan Dickerman once again answering the question how to merge multiple different audio files into a single audio file and maybe even change the audio file format. Common question comes up this time of year as people are auditioning and submitting their scales and audition excerpts in multiple files, and folks need them uploaded into single files or collections of files for the audition. So here we have our source files in the M4A MPEG-4 audio format, otherwise known as AAC or Advanced Audio Codec, and this is commonly output by QuickTime or iOS, iPhone type devices. And in this case, we need to collect them all into a single file and send it into an MP3 for upload. So what we will do is we will use an open source tool called Audacity. Now, the last time I did this video, I used GarageBand, which is a fine tool for this. It has a few more extra bells and whistles, which some people find confusing, but it is also only available on a Mac platform. So I got the question, what do I do if I'm not on a Mac? Even if you are on a Mac, GarageBand is a 1 gigabyte download, and that might be a little much for people who maybe are tight on space or don't have a good bandwidth connection and don't have the time to download a 1 gigabyte application. Audacity is open source. It's also much smaller. The whole thing is less than 50 megabytes, so it's a much quicker download. Now, if you're not familiar with open source, what that means is that it's a tool that is available as source code, and also if you download it as compiled, folks have compiled it for multiple different platforms here. What open source means is source is freely available, and it means that it is not controlled by a single company. There's not one company that is in charge of it generally. It's in charge of all the work. People can see the source code all over the world. You can build it yourself. You can make modifications. You can submit those modifications as changes. And that means that people, paid or unpaid, local or all over the world, everybody can contribute to keeping that software running. In a program like Audacity, which is widely used on multiple platforms, there are many people who have an interest in keeping it current, keeping it working, adding new features. And that means it can be maintained without the control of a single entity necessarily doing what you don't want. One of the downsides to that is that it is its own piece. There's a couple extra pieces that we'll need to talk about in terms of getting all of it installed. And also it's not distributed through an app store, so it's not officially signed like by Apple in this case on their app store. That means you're going to get warnings when you install it saying this is not a officially recognized developer by Apple. Are you sure you want to install it? Those sort of questions. So we'll get to those, but be aware this is a slightly different install experience if you're not familiar with open source. One other thing to note, as of the end of 2018, we're on a 2.3.0 version, which is still 32-bit, and we know they're working on 64-bit for the 2.3.1. So that's soon and will be necessary on newer operating systems in the near future. Once you've got Audacity itself installed and running, you're going to want to pull down a couple more pieces right away because it needs the piece that knows how to export to MP3 files, and you need the piece that knows how to import multiple different audio file formats. And those are not part of Audacity itself. Those are libraries that are available from other different open source projects. Handily enough, if you go into the preferences and you look in libraries, you'll see here's the MP3 library version and the FFmpeg library. Both of those are used quite a lot, so you want to hit the download button on those right away, and that will take you to the instructions on how to download each of those individual libraries so that you can have all the full features you need for the task at hand. I have these already installed here, so we can skip that step. I will tell you one thing to be aware of when you install these guys is because, as I say, these are not distributed through the official Apple Store and they're not approved by Apple in that sense, you'll possibly get some warnings as this is being distributed by an unidentified developer, and each of these packages give you these instructions on how to properly open and install them after you get that warning. So if you do get those, don't be alarmed, it's pretty common. And as with all open source, anything you download from strangers on the internet, feel free to run your virus checker before you actually install the software and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, regardless. Okay, so on to the task at hand. It's installed, it's ready to run. We have all of the files that we want to install right here, and we're going to drag them into Audacity. before I do that, I wanted to point out a couple of useful features. When you open it up, you have this timeline, similar to all these tools, and down here, a handy sampling rate for your project. 44,100 samples per second is the CD sampling rate, so it's usually the default on a lot of these tools. You may need to adjust it if that's not what you intend. This is also a non-destructive editor. That means that you're incorporating these files into a project, but you're not changing the original files. The stuff you do within the project, moving them around or changing their order, or even making edits in the project, is not affecting the original files. In our case, what we're going to do is we're going to drag them all into a project, put them in the order we want, export the file into the audio into a single file, and then we can actually throw away the project itself. We don't need the project. We have the output files that we need. So here I have all the files selected. Again, each of these has an individual scale or excerpt, and we're going to drag them all with a Command A onto our timeline for Audacity. And you'll see the first thing it does is it puts them all in the timeline, each with its own individual track, which has the downside of the fact that they actually play all together, which is not what we want. We want them ordered and playing one right after the other. But it has this handy tool I'll show you, which will help. And to put it all on screen at the same time, the first thing I'm going to do is hit this button on each track to collapse them into something smaller, so they're taking up less real estate on the screen. And I could see them all at once. And now I can grab them by this square here and put them vertically in the order I want. So I'll grab here, drag up. Next I want this major scale here. Then I want this major scale, then that one, then that one, and finally chromatic, and then Largo before Allegro. So there's all the tracks I want vertically in the right order. And now there's this handy feature in Audacity, and I'll do this by selecting all the tracks with Command A. And under Tracks, Align End to End, and that puts them end to end with the track above immediately being followed by the track below. And that is what we want to play. So now the file plays back exactly the way we want. All we have to do is export it into the type of file we want. In this case, it's an MP3, which is right there. Also, we have this handy export audio with a few more details. So we can give it a complete on the desktop. File type is MP3, but you do have all these other choices of how you want the files exported. And in our case, we'll use variable bitrate, best quality, in-joint stereo. We'll save the file to our desktop in this case, and we're done. Oh, we do have the opportunity here to add the tags for the file if you want to add them here. Let's save that for later. And there they are. The file gets exported into the MP3 format, and it's ready for upload. So that's all we need to do in this tool. And again, we're now done with the project. We don't need to save this little thing we've created in Audacity. So we could quit the tool. We don't need to save the project, and we're done. Anyway, that's all there is to it in Audacity. Again, another free open source tool available on multiple platforms. I hope it's useful to you. And we'll catch you next time.